"There's a ghost behind Andy's back," said my 5-year-old daughter, pointing at my brother's wife. We were all busy preparing for a family gathering at our parents' house when her words startled us. My brother laughed nonchalantly at my daughter's comment, but in stark contrast, his wife turned beet red and raised her voice. "Don't say things like that." Surprised by her sudden anger, I stopped what I was doing in the kitchen. But when my daughter continued, "But that ghost is..." my sister-in-law suddenly started trembling and turned pale. We were all confused by her reaction, but later we would learn the shocking reason behind it. I left my parents' home when I got a job and met my husband at work. We got married when I was 28. After that, we were blessed with our daughter, Elle, and lived happily. The truth is, Elle has a spiritual sensitivity, but that's a secret between her and me. You see, once when my friend came to visit, Elle said there was a man behind my friend's back, which really scared her. To prevent young Elle from being viewed strangely by others, we made a promise to keep ghost talk just between the two of us. Unlike me, my brother chose to work locally. He got married 7 years ago, had a son, and lived with our mother in the family home. Since I lived far away and couldn't visit often, I was grateful to my brother and his wife, Stephanie, for living with Mom. However, every time I visited once or twice a year, I noticed a slight tension between Stephanie and Mom. I tried to casually mention it to my brother, but he, being his easygoing self, seemed completely oblivious to the subtle dynamics between his wife and mother-in-law. One time, my brother's family, my family, and Mom gathered for a barbecue in the spacious backyard of our family home. The pizza oven and barbecue area that Dad had built by hand were often used for gatherings with friends and family. As the barbecue was winding down, I suggested a family trip to Mom, who seemed a bit tired. I wanted her to have a chance to relax and refresh. "Hey, why don't we all go to a spa next month? I heard about this hotel with a great reputation. They say the buffet is delicious, and you can get spa treatments too." I took out a hotel brochure from my bag and showed it to Mom. It was full of photos of relaxing spa facilities. "Oh, how lovely. It's been ages since I've been to a spa," Mom said, her eyes sparkling as she looked at the brochure. But at that moment, Stephanie abruptly set down the dish she was holding with a clatter. "Planning to waste money again?" Her cold voice surprised me, and I looked at her. Mom's expression immediately clouded over. "That's not my intention at all. It's been so long since we've had a trip, I thought a little treat would be nice." Mom started to explain nervously to Stephanie, but her expression remained cold. "We haven't had the chance for a family trip before, and I thought it might be nice for Stephanie and the others too." I hurriedly tried to back up Mom. "We can't afford such an expensive hotel. You need to consider the burden on our household budget. Or are you planning to pay for everything?" She said this without even a hint of a smile, turning her gaze towards me. I was left speechless by her words, and Mom fell silent, looking down. "Well, our son is starting elementary school next year. There will be a lot of expenses," my brother chimed in with his usual laid-back tone, probably trying to smooth things over, but the atmosphere remained heavy. There was hardly any conversation after that, with only the quiet sounds of cleaning up echoing in the twilight. It was February of the following year when we received the sudden news that Mom had passed away. I was in the middle of packing my suitcase for a late visit home, as my husband and I had been too busy with work to return for the Christmas holidays. Mom, who had always prided herself on her good health with no chronic illnesses, what could have happened? In my shock and grief, I immediately contacted my brother, who told me that she had collapsed in the shower room. I had heard that many elderly people collapse in the bathroom due to sudden changes in blood pressure from temperature differences. But I never imagined it would happen to my own mother. I remembered how happy she looked when I suggested the family trip. Tears welled up and regret filled my heart. If only I had taken just Mom to the spa. The funeral was held soon after, and throughout the service, I noticed my daughter looking at me repeatedly, as if she wanted to say something. However, in my grief and confusion, I didn't have the emotional capacity to listen to her at that time, even though her expression nagged at me. That summer, I returned to my parents' home for a family gathering. There was so much to do, and time flew by as I helped my brother and Stephanie with the preparations. As relatives started arriving and the house became bustling with activity, my daughter Elle was quietly reading a book with my brother's son. Suddenly, she stood up and pointed at Stephanie. "There's a ghost behind your back." At those words, the adults around her paused for a moment to look at her, but quickly returned to their tasks, laughing and saying things like, "I wonder if children can see such things." My brother also laughed casually and placed his hand on Elle's head. However, Stephanie, who had been pointed at, turned bright red with anger. "Don't say things like that," she shouted. Elle, suddenly scolded, looked up at Stephanie with a confused expression. "But that ghost is Grandma," my daughter announced. The moment Elle said this, Stephanie turned pale and began to tremble. Something was off. While my brother was perplexed by Stephanie's sudden change in behavior, knowing about Elle's spiritual sensitivity, was pondering the meaning of her words. Could it be that Mom's death wasn't an accident? Determined to know the truth, I decided to investigate what had happened to Mom. Even though it was my family home, I felt uncomfortable rummaging around without permission. So, I decided to ask my brother for help. I had just heard from him that Stephanie was planning to take their son to visit her parents for a few days. Realizing this was my chance, I quickly made preparations and headed back to the family home to investigate with my brother. Upon arriving at the house, I immediately went to Mom's room. As I entered, I saw the small desk with photos of Dad and her two grandchildren, along with gardening magazines from her hobby. My heart clenched at these reminders of Mom. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself that now wasn't the time for sentimentality. First, I started opening the drawers of Mom's dresser one by one from the top. There weren't many clothes, and it seemed they hadn't been touched since Mom passed away. As I reached into the back of the bottom drawer, my hand touched something hard. "What's this?" The object I felt was a small notebook. When I looked inside, I realized it was Mom's diary. As I turned the pages, I gasped in shock. Coming to my senses, I turned to my brother. Brother, this. What is it? Are you okay? I found this in Stephanie's room. My brother said, holding out a piece of paper before I could show him the diary. The moment I saw it, I was certain that Mom's death was no accident. A week later, I visited the family home again with my husband and daughter. The house felt empty and lonely without Mom. That day, the children had tired themselves out playing and were dozing off early, so my husband took them to the bedroom. Seizing this opportunity, I called out to Stephanie. Stephanie, I'd like to talk to you in the living room. Can you come? She looked a bit annoyed at being interrupted from her chores, but followed me nonetheless. What is it? Why so formal all of a sudden? Stephanie crossed her arms and stared at me. It's been half a year since Mom passed away. Stephanie, isn't it time you told us the truth? What are you talking about? Facing her cold expression, I pulled out Mom's notebook from my bag and held it out to her. This is the diary Mom wrote before she died. I'm going to read what's written here. Stephanie's eyes seemed to waver for a moment. Lately, I can't seem to get up in the morning. Even though I get enough sleep, my head feels foggy. It's like being in a mist. Sometimes this symptom lasts all day. Mom had started writing about changes in her health from last December. Until then, her diary entries had been about her normal daily life, but she began to write detailed accounts of her condition and symptoms, perhaps worried about the gradual changes. It was written that she had been experiencing more dizzy spells and could barely walk, but Stephanie had insisted she go shopping, forcing her to go out even when she didn't feel well. After meals, she would be hit with strong drowsiness and often couldn't concentrate. She had even gone to the hospital, but they couldn't find the cause. As I read from the diary, I could see Stephanie's face becoming more and more tense. It seems that even when Mom was too sleepy to stay awake and lay down on the sofa, you forced her to take a bath. So what? Isn't it normal to take a bath every day? What's wrong with that? Stephanie's voice was laced with irritation. You were regularly forcing Mom to overexert herself when she wasn't feeling well. Even when she said she wanted to rest, you wouldn't listen. I have a job too, you know. I'm busy. If we're living together, it's only natural for your mother to help out a little, isn't it? She said to me without a hint of remorse. Besides, where's the proof that what's written in that notebook is true? Maybe your mother deliberately wrote lies to make me look bad. Stephanie smiled thinly, as if suggesting my story was made up. Seeing her like this, I took out another piece of evidence I had prepared. Then what's this? I held out a crumpled prescription in front of her eyes. This was what my brother said he had found in Stephanie's room. You tried to make Mom's death look like an accident by making her take large doses of this sleep-inducing medication, didn't you? The symptoms of drowsiness and dizziness are typical side effects when this drug is taken in large amounts. Stop with these baseless accusations. That's medication I use myself. As Stephanie turned away, trying to feign innocence, my anger was about to reach its peak when suddenly, the door opened with a bang. We both startled and looked towards the sound. Standing there was my daughter, who was supposed to be in the bedroom. The grandma behind Andy's back looks angry, Elle said, pointing at Stephanie just like before. Stephanie turned pale in an instant. I told you to stop saying things like that. It's impossible. Stephanie shouted. I said it before too. She said you killed her, my daughter retorted, unfazed by Stephanie's outburst. What Elle is saying is true. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want to frighten you, but she can see spirits, I said, rushing to my daughter's side and placing a hand on her shoulder with a smile. Thank you. I'm sure Grandma is grateful that you had the courage to tell us. I nodded to my daughter and encouraged her to go back to the bedroom, then closed the door. Stephanie was muttering to herself, "It can't be. Why did you do it to Mom?" I asked. It wasn't me, Stephanie glared at me, still trying to deny it even at this point. Then, my brother, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I want you to tell the truth. If we test Mom's blood, we can determine if it matches the components of the drug on that prescription. How are you going to get blood from someone who's already been cremated? Are you stupid? Stephanie laughed through her nose, but in fact, blood had been taken from Mom's body to investigate the cause of her death. Upon hearing this, Stephanie seemed to realize she could no longer make excuses and decided to come clean. I couldn't stand living in this backwater anymore. No trendy shops, no cafes. I was sick of it. I wanted to sell this house and use the money to live in the city again. Stephanie avoided our gaze, but eventually spoke as if she had given up. The reason I said your mother was wasting money was because I wanted her to leave as much inheritance as possible. That's all there is to it. I was shocked by her words, spoken with such a sullen expression. So that's why you... Is that your reason for taking a family member's life? My brother's face was red with anger, his voice trembling, but she showed no sign of being moved by his words. This house and garden are spacious. I thought we could get a good amount if we sold it. But your mother said she didn't want to leave this place until she died, so I had no choice. Knowing how much Mom treasured this house, I couldn't believe Stephanie's callous words. This house is filled with not just our memories, but also our parents' love. Don't talk about selling it so easily. You need to face your crime and reflect on what you've done. Saying this, I picked up the phone to call the police. Seeing my action, Stephanie's face suddenly turned pale, and she abruptly changed her attitude, clinging to me. Wait. The police. Don't do anything so drastic. In this small town, rumors will spread quickly. Please, anything but that. However, I shook off Stephanie's hands and looked at her with sharp eyes. I will never forgive you for taking Mom's life for your own selfish desires. At my words, Stephanie seemed to finally realize the gravity of what she had done, and her shoulders slumped. It seemed she had lost the will to resist, and even when we heard the sound of police sirens, she remained motionless, just standing there. Stephanie was taken away by the police, and I later heard that she confessed to her crime and would be spending a long time behind bars. My brother divorced Stephanie and received a lump sum of $150,000 from her assets as alimony and child support for their son. He told me he wants to create new memories with his son in the house our parents left us. 3 months have passed, and today is the monthly Memorial Day for Mom. I was sitting on the porch of our family home, watching Elle and my brother's son playing with a ball in the garden. "Hey! We're ready to go visit the grave," my brother called from the parking lot. The 2 children cheerfully responded and got into the car with us as we headed to the cemetery where Mom rests. When we arrived at the grave, my daughter said, "I think I heard someone's voice," looking around curiously. "It might be Grandma," I said, and Elle nodded with a happy smile. At that moment, an unseasonably gentle, warm breeze caressed our cheeks. It felt just like the warmth of Mom's touch from my childhood.